Good evening. I trust you had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. So I've chosen from our modern point of view, so say our present day point of view, a rather strange discourse. It's entitled The Dog Duty Ascetic. Ascetics were ascetics are well known in most religions. As you know, the Buddha himself underwent certain ascetic practices, especially the process of drawing the body down through eating less and less and less, which was more of a Jain practice. And in the medieval ages, in the early Christian ages, were ascetics who lived on top of pillars, and they would come down every so often, but they would stay up there for quite some time, lowering their chamber pots, I think. And in the medieval ages, the anchorites, they were men and women who locked themselves into a room in a cathedral and stuff. The most famous, of course, was Julian of Norwich, who's worth reading. So there was this very strong element in all religious traditions of a sort of fierce asceticism. But there's nothing quite like this in the West, because this is on the basis of rebirth, of reincarnation. So here we have the Blessed One. He's living in a Kalian country, and he's two people have come to see him. Puna, who was one of a Kalian, was an ox duty ascetic, and also Senia, a naked dog duty ascetic. And Puna, the ox duty ascetic, paid homage to the Blessed One, sat by one side, and they both exchanged greetings. And after the courteous and amiable talk was finished, Puna addressed the Blessed One. Venerable Sir, this Senia is a naked dog duty ascetic who does what is hard to do. He eats his food when it is thrown on the ground. He has long taken up and practiced the dog duty ascetic. Dog duty. So you can imagine him there sitting like a dog. What will be his destination? What will be his future course? Enough, Puna, let that be. Do not ask me that. A second time and a third time, the ox duty ascetic asked the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, this Senia is a naked dog duty ascetic. What will be his destination? What will be his future course? Well, Puna, since I certainly cannot persuade you when I say, enough, Puna, let that be, do not ask me, I shall therefore answer you. Here, Puna, someone develops the dog duty fully and uninterruptedly. He develops the dog duty habit fully and uninterruptedly. He develops the dog duty mind fully and uninterruptedly, and he develops dog behavior fully and uninterrupted. Having done so, on the dissolution of the body after death, he will reappear in the company of dogs. And if he has such a view as this, by this virtue or observance or asceticism or holy life, I shall become a great god or lesser god, that is wrong view in this case. Now, there are two destinations for one with wrong view, I say. Hell or the animal realm. So Puna, if his dog duty succeeds, it will lead him to the company of dogs. And if it fails, it will lead him to hell. Now, when this was said, Senia, the naked dog ascetic, cried out and burst into tears. Well, you would. And then the Blessed One said to Puna the son, Puna, I could not persuade you when I said, enough, Puna, do not ask me this. Then Senia, the naked dog ascetic, said, Venerable Sir, I'm not crying because the Blessed One has said this about me, but because I have long taken up and practiced this dog duty asceticism. In other words, he's very quickly recognized that it's been a waste of time. Worse than that, it's been worse than a waste of time. He's now developed the dog duty mind. He's developed mind like a dog. So then, of course, he says, look, my friend Puna, son of the Kalians, is an ox duty ascetic. He's long taken up and practiced the ox duty. What's his destination? What will his future course be? Do not ask me that. First and second time, Venerable Sir, this Puna, son of the Kalians, is an ox duty ascetic. He's taken up this practice a long time. What will be his destination? Senia, since I certainly cannot persuade you when I say, enough, Senia, let that be, do not ask me that, I shall therefore answer you. Senia, someone who develops the ox duty fully and uninterruptedly, the ox duty habit fully and uninterruptedly, ox duty mind, and the ox behavior fully and uninterruptedly, having done so on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in the company of oxen. And if he has such a view that by this virtue, observance or asceticism or holy life, I shall become a great god or some lesser god, this is wrong view. Now there are two destinations for one with wrong view, I say, hell and the animal realm. So Senia, if this ox duty succeeds, it will lead him to the company of oxen, and if it fails, it will lead him to hell. When this was said, Puna, son of the Koreans, the ox duty ascetic, cried out and burst into tears. Well, you would, wouldn't you? And then the Blessed One, Senia, said to the dog ascetic, Senia, I could not persuade you when I said, enough, Senia, let that be, do not ask me. Venerable Sir, says Puna, I'm not crying because the Blessed One has said this about me, but because I have long taken up and practiced the ox duty. So again, this ox duty ascetic realizes his big mistake. And he says, I have confidence in the Blessed One thus. The Blessed One is capable of teaching me the Dharma in such a way I can abandon this ox duty, and that this Senia, the naked dog ascetic, can abandon his dog duty. Then he says, well, listen to what I have to say. There are 4 kinds of actions proclaimed by me after realizing them for myself with direct knowledge, direct experience. There is dark action with dark result. There is bright action with bright result. There is dark and bright action with dark and bright result. And there is action that is neither dark nor bright, with neither dark nor bright result. Action that leads to the destruction of action. Right, well, you've got to get into the language. Basically, this dark action is, of course, immoral behavior, unethical behavior. So unethical behavior leads to unethical results, and ethical, moral behavior leads to lovely results. And of course, most people have a mixture of both, a little bit on the dark side and a little bit on the bright side. But there's also a level where there's none of that, and that belongs to the one who is fully liberated. So that sort of action in the Abhidhamma, this later work, was called Kriya, functional. So most people's actions are either kusala or akusala, skillful or unskillful, wholesome or unwholesome. But when you become liberated, because there's no self-generation, no selfing going on, no attachment going on, the actions are simply pure. And of course, the defilements are gone too. So it's always a wholesome action, but there's no consequence for that person in terms of rebirthing, right? Because there's no identity with it. It's just pure action. So then, of course, he says, those with dark action will have afflictive bodily formations, afflictive verbal formations, and afflictive mental. So those people who are acting immorally or unethically will have afflictive, painful, etc., mental, verbal, and bodily actions. and they will reappear in such a world that is afflictive, that's painful, and in the case due to being, and that's because of this constant rebirthing. So that's what he says. This I say, beings are heirs to their actions. You're an heir to your actions. So whatever a previous self did yesterday, this self now has to deal with it. And so he says the same, of course, with those things that are bright and those things that are dark and bright. There's a mixture there, okay, of afflictive and unafflictive contacts. And so unafflictive and afflictive feelings, right, mixed with pain and pleasure, as in the case of human beings and some gods and some beings in the lower worlds. So the ones who are bright action would end up in the heavenly realm, where basically you're happy all the time. And if, of course, you've done some really bad stuff, you end up in the animal or the or worse, the hell realm. But the human beings, it's a bit of mixture of both. And of course, that's the blessing of this particular existence, because with our bright intelligence, this intuitive awareness, we can find our way out of the problem. This is not open to people in hell. They're suffering too much. Animals, of course, don't have the intelligence, and people in the heavens are enjoying life too much. And of course, remember that these realms are mirrored in the human life, aren't they? There are people who are basically so caught up in their desires so enjoying themselves because they've got billions of pounds or whatever, and they're not going to think about the spiritual life. And there are people who are caught up in a sort of an animal existence of drugs, etc., where the intelligence is dulled. And there are people, of course, who are in great suffering, either mental suffering or physical suffering, where it's difficult to practice spiritually. They're sort of lost in it. So all these realms are just mirrors, really, of what we see in the human realm. And then finally, of course, this the neither dark nor bright actions. That's the one where there's no consequence. The volition in abandoning the kind of action that is bright, brings bright results, and the volition of abandoning the kind which is dark, and also with dark and bright results. So the Arahant, the one who's liberated, is lifted above that sort of duality. These four kinds of actions I've realized for myself, the Buddha says. So now Puna, of course, he's the ox, isn't he? I think he's the ox. Yes, he's the ox ascetic. So he's really taken for this. He's really said, "Magnificent, venerable sir, magnificent," and he becomes a lay follower from that time onwards. And the dog duty ascetic also says the same thing. The usual, this lovely phrasing that comes up, turning upright what has been overthrown, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see form. And he also goes and to the Blessed One. And he actually wants to receive, he wants to become a bhikkhu. And when somebody becomes a bhikkhu who's been involved in some other tradition, they have to be on probation for 4 months. That's now a rule in the order, you see. So he put him on probation for 4 months and then ordained him. The Buddha, in fact, ordained him. And so then just the last little paragraph tells us what happens to Saniya, the naked dog duty ascetic. So he received the ordination from the Blessed One, full admission, and then not long after his full admission, dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent, and resolute, the Venerable Saniya, by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, here and now, entered upon and abided in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from home life into homelessness. And then this lovely phrase that these are phrases that that you'll find often repeated throughout the discourses. He directly knew birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. And the Venerable Senior became one of the Arahats. So although we started off in a sort of gloomy place with somebody behaving like an ox and another one behaving like a dog, it seems as though they finally ended up in a very good place. And Senior became an Arahat, fully liberated. So we don't have to choose that particular path. We don't have to do the dog of duty path to become fully liberated. We've got a slightly easier path, you might say, of just being ordinary people. So there we are. I hope that this discourse on the dog duty ascetic has been of interest, and I can only hope that, like Senior, you will be ardent, etc., with your practice, and I trust you'll be fully liberated from all suffering sooner rather than later. So we can do a little practice.